This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast gems.
When kids don't play, they grow up without imagination. Then it's all small talk and awkward weather chats. Good thing Gushers, Fruit by the Foot, and Fruit Roll-Ups are made to be played with. You better be playing.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Chris Holmes, and this is Burned by Books. Here you'll find interviews with writers you already love, like Jennifer Egan and Rebecca Mackay, mixed in with up-and-coming voices like Alexandra Kleeman and Rumaan Alam. You'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but check out previous episodes at burnedbybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at burnedbybooks. Let's start the show. Can anyone ever really escape their past, especially when that past is family? Chelsea Bieker's powerful new novel, Madwoman, introduces us to Clove, a woman on the run from her past, even as she feels frozen in place as the mother-influencer parent of 2 children and a wife to a caring and gentle man. Clove is not her real name. She's lived under several names, living with and loving other people before settling into family life as Clove. But her real name, Calla Lily, echoes in her anxieties and fears about the violence she left in Hawaii. To those close to her, Clove is an orphan, parents killed in a tragic car crash, but a select few know that her mother was horribly battered by Clove's father, and that she was charged with his death and sentenced to prison. Clove's choice to try and forget her mother and the acts of violence that shaped her childhood sets her on a path seeking to control and protect her children's lives and the bubble of her perfectly organic family. When a letter arrives from a woman's prison, Clove's bubble is burst and she will be forced to confront her past and everything that she has believed to be true about her present. Madwoman takes up the uncomfortable truth that so many women are shaped by the violence of the men around them. In Clove, Chelsea Bieker gives us a woman who refuses that shaping, even as it presses down upon her. And she does so in such concentrated prose, and it is bursting with nerves and laughter and absurdity and a search for dignity and visibility. Madwoman asks us to consider that motherhood may indeed not always be a gift. Chelsea Bieker is the author of the debut novel Godshot, which was longlisted for the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize, named a Barnes & Noble Pick of the Month, and was a national indie bestseller. Her short story collection, Heartbroke, won the California Book Award and was a New York Times Best California Book of 2022, and an NPR Best Book of the Year. Her writing has appeared in the Paris Review, Granta, The Cut, Wall Street Journal, McSweeney's, and others. She is the recipient of a Rana Jaffe Writers Award, as well as residencies from MacDowell and Tin House. Raised in Hawaii and California, she now lives in Portland, Oregon, with her husband and 2 children. Welcome to Burned by Books, Chelsea Bieker.
Hi, Chris. It's so wonderful to be here, and I could just listen to you talk for hours. You have an amazing voice, and I loved hearing your take on the book. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's so nice of you. So, motherhood and domestic violence are a powerful and painful combination in Madwoman. Right from the opening of the book, you invoke the ways in which violence shrinks so many women, makes them ask for less, to be grateful for the crumbs. This is a story of one woman's attempt to throw off the shackles of that violence, but it's also a story of many women, their stories stretched across time and place. Did you envision this novel as speaking to both the focused vision of Clove's life and to that broader picture?
I think when I started writing, I was really hyper focused on Clove's experience of new motherhood. I wasn't totally conscious that I was writing this book about domestic violence. I think, as it often happens when we start writing something, it's just with this little seed, and then it kind of starts to reveal itself. And this book felt like it really revealed itself to me as I wrote it. And it was actually such an exciting and at times really emotional experience to write it because of everything that was being revealed to me. And so I started with motherhood, but it became kind of quickly apparent to me that I couldn't really write about motherhood without exploring the ways that domestic violence, infiltrates that, even a generation removed, right? Because Clove does not, and she's not living in a violent situation. She's removed herself so entirely. Her life looks so different than it did in childhood, but she's still haunted by the past, and she feels infuriated by that, I think. And she's like, how many outward things can I do to shed this? And the answer, I think the book is actually really about the fact that she has to kind of face that part of herself and integrate it versus deny it. And that was a lot of the hard work that I was doing at the same time as writing this. It really mirrors it. The plot, I just want to clarify, is like so different than my actual life, but I think her emotional journey really mirrors what I was going through at the time, which was, my parents were ailing and coming toward the end of their lives. And in that, there was a lot of reflection around the past for me. And you can't help but think of things unsaid or the ways that story is formulated to kind of shape a narrative. And my dad had a really different narrative of how our life went, and my mom had a super different narrative. And I think as a child, I was really forced to adopt my dad's narrative of things just to stay safe. And as an adult, I've had to peel back the layers on that. And when I was thinking about my childhood and my mom's experience as a mother, writing this book, it just really hit me in a new way that she was having to mother through unspeakable violence every day and ultimately couldn't mother. She lost custody of me when I was 9. And so I think so often the narrative was turned to her, like her addiction, her failure to be a mother. And once I became a mother myself, I really had to look at that closer because I was like, there's no way I could mother under those circumstances. And that male violence had totally come between the intimacy between me and my mom. And so this book to me is a lot about that. And it's what I was really unpacking at that time in which I wrote it. So I wanted to get at like the insidious little ways that domestic violence affects, the generation after it too. The Clove asks in the book, where does the energy of violence go? Because she feels that she's still holding that experience, even though, her father is dead. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's revealing and a really interesting way of thinking about how we have to reconceive of the narratives we used to understand our childhood, and how motherhood and having children can really prompt that reevaluation. Even though this book is about terrifying domestic violence, grave mental health issues, fear and anxiety, it's also very funny, particularly in its skewering of the mommy blogging sphere and the intense focus on the so-called purity of certain foods and nutritional cures. Was it difficult to blend those two moods of the novel, and why was the world of mom influencer such a ripe area for you?
I think when I became a mother, you're kind of immediately, or I felt at least, because I didn't have my own mom as sort of guide. And that's where the internet seemed to come in. I was like, what's the best brand of diapers? What's attachment parenting? How can I ensure a different life for my child? And that is when I discovered, at the time, Instagram wasn't as much of a thing. But when I was pregnant with my daughter, it was all about these mommy bloggers that were kind of rising to prominence. And they were so fascinating. And it was this window into their lives. And I kind of looked to them as to tell me what to do. I didn't really know. I was like, how do I raise a child, or what is pregnancy like? What should birth be like? I realized there was so little that I knew. I even realized things like, I had never seen a birth. I had never seen someone breastfeeding. And, the internet is ready to offer all of those things. So, and then,
Sure is.
yeah, going out from there, when Instagram really took hold, and you kind of feel like you're just bombarded every day with this image of motherhood and good motherhood.
Mm.
And I think in the book, Clove really finds some comfort in that. Like, she can look at her phone and be like, okay, if I can just match this, then I know I'm doing it right, because otherwise I have no blueprint for how this should go. And she kind of depends on that. And it's like it's a way to feel safe for her. If I can buy the right brands, and I can make the right recipes, and I can, do the right baby sling wearing attachment parenting, then it's just another step away from the past. And I wanted to explore that in the book. Thank you for saying the book is really funny, because I can't really write about darkness without that counterbalance of humor. That's always been important to me, because that's how life is, actually. Like,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, I wanted to show a character who, yes, she's been really shaped by violence, by early loss, and all of that baggage, but she's still a full person in the world. She's still, got kind of a scathing point of view. She's paying attention. She's funny, and she's exhausted. And I think in early motherhood, when you're so tired, and then like your kid poops on your shoe, sometimes you really just have to laugh. Like, it's so ridiculous, the kind of weird situations you find yourself in out of total desperation. And I think the book reflects that sort of wild swing from, one second you're immersed in thinking about like your first love, and then the next second your kid is screaming at you to open a popsicle, and it's always both things. So I wanted to show that.
Yeah, there are many scenes in which Clove's children are acting in a way that is kind of wonderful, kind of absurd. They're very precocious, and they produce a lot of humor in the book, and yet, like, Clove's need to have a sense of control over the things in their lives is so strong that sometimes I felt like she couldn't appreciate the humor herself, even as I was sort of laughing at their amazing things that they would say, and that it becomes so all-consuming that she has to make sure that violence doesn't touch them. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that she is so anxiety-ridden that something could happen to them and it would be her fault, that she really can't let anyone in. She can't accept the help that she so desperately wants. And where the book begins, her and her husband are in this back and forth about getting a nanny to help a little bit. And she really cannot fathom that. Finally, she does sort of allow someone in, and it becomes a very interesting relationship. But it's very hard for her to imagine turning any of that over. She feels that life will not award her such leniency. She kind of has this idea that there's like a universal rule system. And because in her eyes, because she's done so many things in her early life that are questionable, that she's just not going to be awarded any, as she says, common mess ups or something. He has to really stay perfect for them. And she doesn't ever want to let anyone into that. I think it's also really wound into this idea, she's also experiencing post-weaning anxiety that she is only just kind of understanding what that is. And I didn't know what that was either until I stopped breastfeeding my daughter and had a huge hormonal shift after that no one really talks about that can happen. And it really created a lot of anxiety in me. Suddenly, I just felt anxious about the tiniest things. And she was like 2 years old. I was like, this is so weird. Like, this kind of feels like what people talk about with postpartum
Right.
depression. But why is it happening to me now? And it was a long road for me to realize what had happened. And I think in that time, like I clung so hard to that control and to the purity of everything we were eating and making sure that there was no danger in the house and this sort of all-consuming dread that would just not go away. And very little is known about that. And I really wanted to explore that in novel form because I think it's important.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream house or ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Shh. Hear that? Big waves are calling. Dive into refreshment with Kona Big Wave. Tropical flavor and the taste of aloha in every drop. This summer, don't just listen. Join Kona on the Big Wave Bonfire Tour. More information at konabigwave.com/bigwavemusic. Kona Big Wave. Liquid Aloha. Copyright 2025 Kona Brewing Co., St. Louis, Missouri. Mahalo for enjoying responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just like postpartum depression is just they're scratching the surface on, let alone sort of post-weaning depression and other kinds of anxieties. And hopefully this will be a way in which perhaps women who are experiencing this can see themselves represented. And that at least can be maybe a source of some consolation. I mean, Madwoman joins a number of exceptional recent novels of the last year that deal with some of the uncomfortable realities of loving children, but not always finding complete satisfaction in their care. This includes Kimberly King Parsons' We Were the Universe, Miranda July's All Fours, and others. One of my favorite things that happens in the book is when Clove secretly gets a job at the organic food store. And it seems kind of drawn out of this sense of like, where can I sort of find satisfaction in my life? And is it with this other person I could be friends with? Is it with kind of being able to control a situation? But I wondered what you thought about representations in literature and of this idea of loving children, but not finding them satisfying of, one's complete needs or desires.
Yeah, I love that question. I think that when I first became a mother, I had not really read any books that represented motherhood in a complex way. I remember, first encountering, I think Merritt Tierce, Love Me Back was a book that was about motherhood and the complexities of that. And it really rocked my world. And this was a long time ago, but I love, it's always two things, right? Like I already said that, but I wanted to find more books that really showed that. And you're right that now it feels like we have, there started to be like a really nice amount of them. And I think of like Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder and the ones that you mentioned as well. And School for Good Mothers by Jasmine Chan, we're starting to have these, but I think that it's still a little scary to say that. I think School for Good Mothers really represents that anxiety of like anytime someone might perceive you as a bad mother, like in that book, it's extreme, your kid gets taken away and it's like
you get sent to the school prison.
Yeah, it's such a good metaphor because I read that book, honestly, and I was paranoid for weeks afterward, just imagining like if there was someone in the bushes, watching me have a rough moment with my kids because, they're throwing a tantrum. And I think what I explore in Madwoman a lot is like the shame that she feels, because she does feel a lot of shame kind of coming from the outside world versus support. It's like so often as mothers and fathers, I mean, as parents, you're moving through a world that's really not made for you and your kids. So often there's just not that support out there, and there can actually be a lot of judgment. And I felt that and felt surprised by that as a young mother. There's a post office scene in this book that was so close to my own experience, and that feeling
Oh,
of
really?
exasperation. Yeah, like, oh, I can't even really go to the post office because it's set up in such a way that I'm going to fail because everything is not made for kids. And it's not, our world just really prioritizes youth, like young adult, middle age, but then older and really young, you're kind of screwed. And,
Yeah.
and I feel like,
Although I feel like I would argue that there's something distinctly American about that,
yeah.
because
Oh, yeah.
I feel like other countries, the support networks, whether they
Yes.
be familial or neighborhood, or the way in which children are allowed into spaces
Yes.
in the way that children normally behave and act, and are not sort of looked at askance or yelled at by strangers. That's always been my experience, traveling and living abroad, is that we seem to have landed in a really bad situation in terms of, a country that talks constantly about prioritizing children, but never actually does so.
Exactly. No, I should have said the US for sure. I agree with you. But I wanted to really get at that feeling of shame that she feels like, when she kind of moves about the world. And I find that feeling of shame is really oppressive, and it can it just furthers that feeling of isolation in early motherhood, especially where you're like, where can I go? And it's kind of like the park. You can go to the park and you better be happy with that. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and I wanted to get at that feeling of yearning for some sense of community support, but not really knowing how to get that.
Hmm. Clove's constant awareness of the loss of her mother from her life is in some ways replicated by her inability to get her mother-in-law to feel any affection for her. Tootsie, as she's known, finds Clove to be a drag on her son's talents, spending too much on groceries and taking too long to find a nanny. She's a rather hateful character. How do you feel about Tootsie and her echo of this loss of a mother in Clove's life?
The relationship between Tootsie and Clove is so heartbreaking to me because you're right that Clove is yearning so much for that maternal love or that maternal acceptance or just someone I think that, the book is formatted as a direct address to her mother. And there's a sense that Clove just wants to be seen. She's not sure that her mother's ever truly seen her for who she is, but rather seen her in the bigger story of their sort of, violent upbringing, which is all consuming. But it's like peeling that back as an adult. She's like, gosh, mom, I just really want you to see what my daily life is like. I want you to see what I think about things. And in that desperation for that recognition or just to be observed or seen for your efforts. And she should probably be able to get some of that from Tootsie, but it's very hard to come by. And she can't, and there's probably, right, it's Tootsie isn't this total villain. It's like Tootsie probably wants to connect in some way, but also finds it very hard to access Clove because Clove is very shut down. And in a lot of ways, Clove is having to come to terms with the fact that she has become kind of inaccessible to the people around her because of her lies. So when you have a made up life and you're living in this new identity, that intimacy that you really desire is also hard to come by. So it's sort of twofold. But yeah, Tootsie offers, I think, I hope some comic relief and also And also, it just illustrates the difficulty of what it's like to move through the world as a motherless person and really wanting that, but just kind of failing over and over to achieve it. It remains this mysterious desire to Clove.
Clove's intense friendship with Jane, for whom she secretly takes that job at the organic food store to spend more time with, allows her to tell the story that she has kept from everyone else. In Jane, she feels she has sisterhood and community for the first time in her life. And Jane herself is running from a past exploitation. Their relationship will be a complicated one, but I'm interested to hear you talk a little bit about why this friendship became so crucial for Clove.
I think for Clove, Jane represents this part of her that she left behind when she became a mom. There's sort of a freedom to Jane. She's a very kind of alluring character. She says what she thinks. She's just really compelling to Clove. And I think, she feels Clove is really looking for someone who can cut through the noise of the everyday and kind of go to that intimate place. She doesn't really want to have these surface conversations. She really wants to have these deeper conversations about what motherhood is really like and, the way it feels to have experienced violence. She kind of senses in Jane that Jane can go to those places. And when they first meet, Jane asks Clove, have you suffered? And she's like, yes, have you? They see it in each other. There's a recognition of having gone to some really difficult places and come back on the other side that they see in each other, and it forms like an immediate bond. Whether or not that bond is altogether healthy on all the levels is yet to be seen, but they do sense in each other a similar experience.
When you wanna grow your list size, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot. And when you gotta boost your revenue, pop up like it's hot, hey, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot. Pick your favorite template, you can tailor to your brand. They're MailChimp-erific, you're gonna be a fan. MailChimp your marketing with our new customizable pop-ups.
On top of building this fake volcano for months, I give my daughter Smarty Pants vitamins to support her brain health. So her science fair project sounds more like and less like. And while I may say it's not a competition, of course it's a f***ing competition. Choose Smarty Pants vitamins to support your kids' brain health and save the science fair. Shop on Amazon, smartypantsvitamins.com, or at Target today.
And I do so love Jane in the moment in which there's Tootsie is revealing something that she has found out about Clove's life. And Jane just takes this incredible charge and agency in the situation, which is remarkable and funny and kind of amazing.
Yeah, I think Jane doesn't care as much about appearances as Clove does. And she helps Clove kind of cut closer to the truth of her life. I think she speeds that along, and in sometimes some really comical ways.
Yeah, for sure. She's a great character. Chelsea, before I let you go, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you've been reading recently and whether you have some book recommendations you'd like to pass along.
I do. Well, you already said it, but We Were the Universe by Kimberly King Parsons is a book that came out this year that I just loved so much. It sounds like you've read it and you loved it too. So.
Yeah, I interviewed her and really adored that book.
Yeah, it was so great. So I read Hot Springs Drive by Lindsay Hunter not long ago and was so amazed by it. I loved it. It's kind of a thriller. It just goes to some really interesting places, and it's not what I thought. It's one of those books where you get to the halfway point and you're like, oh, it could have just continued this way or even ended right here, but we're actually going to this whole other place. And it was so expertly done. I loved it. So have you read that one?
No, I haven't. It sounds like an amazing book.
Lindsay is so funny and explores those dark caverns so well. I think that I've been a fan of hers for many years, and she just keeps producing work that I love. So
Well, it's
there's that one.
interesting because you've got those two books, both of which seem to kind of hit that sweet spot of being about very serious things, but have a lot of humor to them.
Exactly. I don't know. I tend to trend toward that type of thing. And then another debut that's coming out soon, or I don't know, it'll probably already be out by the time this airs, but it's called The Volcano Daughters by Gina Maria Balabrera. And I met Gina at a residency a couple years ago as she was finishing a book, and I was so anxious to read it. She is just such a brilliant mind, and I finally got to read it as a galley, and it just blew me away. It was so inventive and surprising, and what a deep and long spanning story. So I would definitely recommend getting a copy of that one and introducing yourself to Gina's work.
Those are three great recommendations, and I want to especially recommend Madwoman by Chelsea Bieker. It's such an absorbing and powerful novel. As I said, it's really funny, sort of tears to your eyes funny, while being quite serious about some of the most pressing issues faced by women and humans as they try and escape violence and their pasts and try and understand who they are in the present. But I really profoundly loved this book, and I'm so happy that I got a chance to talk to you about it, Chelsea.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for your read of it. It was really wonderful to hear your questions, and I really appreciate being on.
Thank you so much. Well, that's all from me for now. My thanks to Chelsea Bieker for coming on to talk about her latest novel, Madwoman. You can find links to purchase Madwoman and all of Chelsea's recommended books at the website, burnedbybooks.com. There you'll find all of our previous episodes, links to buy a podcast t-shirt, and ways to get in contact. As you listen, take a moment to rate the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, this has been Burned by Books.